May we request Mr. Peter Verwer to take the mic and start with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished guests. I've been asked to provide a bit of a scene setter here because APREA, representing international investors, has looked around the world at over 24 countries and looked at their combined brain power in trying to crack this nut, looking at how to provide not just affordable housing, but affordable communities, which lift people up and give them more opportunity. So 24 countries, from China, which delivers more than 10 million homes every year. Some estimate 12 million homes every year, which would actually get to the Housing 2022 program in a couple of years, through to the smaller nations like Singapore, which are great leaders of being incredibly focused, but, they're very small. All of Singapore is, one postcode of India. Nevertheless, the idea is that with all of this brain power and all of these lessons, that maybe there are ideas that could be customized to suit Indian purposes. Many of them you're already implementing, but it was worthwhile having a look at them. So there are 10 big takeaways. I'm going to just focus on the most important of them. The first is that every single country that is tackling affordable housing as a key economic and social, and usually these days environmental issue, trying to create more capital, has very, very clear targets and sees housing not as a supply issue but a choice issue, and understands the different market segments that it's trying to actually provide more opportunity and choice toward. Singapore is a great example there because they distinguish between key workers, young homemakers, seniors, mainstream housing, and with programs that are tied together. And this leads to the second point, that in all of those countries which are making progress to achieving their affordable housing targets, housing is completely integrated into bigger overarching economic and social policies. So in no country where they're actually making progress is housing in a silo. Is housing just in a ministry which, with a job of let's just crank out the supply. In all of those countries making progress, housing is a key component of a broader plan. Indeed, a broader planning system with key KPIs which relate to economic, social capital, opportunity, lifting people out of poverty, education, health. It's all integrated. A key factor there is infrastructure, and we heard in the previous panel that without the economic ecosystem that actually binds together the bricks and mortar, that in fact countries aren't achieving their main goal, which is to raise living standards and opportunity with inclusive growth. So, this is a key takeaway. Of course, it's extraordinarily difficult to do, as you know, to get that integration. But a good recent example in the last fortnight is in the UK, where they announced a £2.3 billion fund for micro-infrastructure. So this is not huge impact infrastructure, this is micro-infrastructure, because what they found that in trying to deliver that extra housing supply, that the blockage might actually be one stormwater drain. It could be an intermodal train bus link. And there's a good recent example in Australia, in Brisbane, that just one small piece of local infrastructure that only the government could solve this problem, that was sold for $70 million, opened up a $1.2 billion master plan community. So dealing with the choke points can be just as important as massive infrastructure. The other key takeaway from the countries which are making progress towards meeting social affordability targets is that they see housing for rent and housing for sale as two important channels that are of equal weight. That it's not just supply so that people can buy homes, it's incredibly important, but it's also supply for rent and to use the opportunity to create a multifamily asset class which pretty much only exists in the United States, to some extent in Japan, and to a lesser extent in Germany and the Netherlands. But the UK has now made it one of its top priorities to have a housing for rent marketplace, as has Australia. And the only way to do that is to actually champion that and to try and synchronize all of the incentives and the infrastructure so that they meld. And I just mentioned Germany and the Netherlands here, that they see the government's role here is absolutely crucial, because the government not only can help supply land, which is on its own balance sheet, but in many countries, the government, a great example being Germany and the Netherlands, have recently said, we want to unlock these homes and this responsibility from our balance sheet, and we want community groups in the private sector to take control, but on our own terms to meet key KPIs. The other very key, clear recurring theme when we look at successful countries here is they all mobilize the capital markets. Real estate investment trusts, infrastructure investment trusts are one component of that, but the other important element, which we mentioned in the last program, is development finance. Every country from Canada to Brazil to South Africa to Australia, 60 different schemes in the United States, in France, in Sweden, in Austria. They all have government as an intermediary that is working to make the markets more efficient. Now, APREA is a very free market organization, but what we've seen over and over again is that no country succeeds without the government playing a very key, smart role as an intermediary. And a good recent example in terms of development finance is the Austrian bond aggregation scheme, which creates smart finance that complements private sector finance, and indeed the Australian and New Zealand governments are picking that up. And of course, the biggest incentive scheme in the world, which we touched upon, sir, just before you arrived, is the United States low-income housing tax credit. So that low-income housing tax credit is a mechanism for creating a far more efficient market with lots of velocity so that there's plenty of supply there. But what it does is it ties the developers and community groups to meeting standards and to raising those standards. So one of the other key findings of our survey of more than 24 countries is that it's not about setting new rules and boxes to tick when it comes to housing. Housing is not about boxes to tick. It's actually creating a more competitive marketplace for building communities and places. And that's what the Americans are doing. The other big learning here that I would mention is one which is close to the Indian Prime Minister's heart, which is in terms of streamlining development assessment systems, land use systems, digitization, single window approaches, state-of-the-art building codes, clear property rights. So what we see in places like the UK, Colombia, of all places, Colombia has one of the world's most efficient development assessment systems, not run by drug cartels, I'm assured, and Singapore as well. So in all of these places, they help consumers, but the development assessment system is very streamlined. And the key factor here is clear rules. Clear rules and not going round and round in circles in terms of who gets to approve what and what powers they have. There is a single clear track of assessment, and the more electronic and online it is, the better. Because poor development assessment, as we found, is just another tax. Poor development assessment is a tax on efficiency. The last couple of areas that I would mention, we saw in the previous speaker, which is about development technology and solutions. The world's biggest housing provider is an insurance company. Legal & General now print, construct, manufacture more homes than any other company in the world, and their plan is to build more and more factories. So this is about modularization. It's about cross-laminated timber, wooden buildings which are cheaper and safer to build, which they're going to get up to 30 stories soon. It's about massive modularization, which has baked into it affordability, which has baked into it efficient electrical wiring, baked into it efficient plumbing, but which is 30 to 50% faster to build and thus cheaper as well. So if we look at all of these measures, there are some key themes. Firstly, that housing is just part of the broader planning system. Secondly, that unless the infrastructure that's needed to support a community is synchronized with the delivery of housing, then the affordability goals won't be met. That all of the effective countries use the capital markets as a lever for providing efficient debt and equity, and that development assessment systems are streamlined, efficient, and with clear rules. And that most countries are looking very closely at technology as a booster, not to wipe out the current construction industry as we know it, but to enhance it. This is an innovative industry, despite what people say, and using the most recent technology is something that can help us meet our goals, which is deliver more quality, more supply, and more choice. Thank you very much.